Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. This week's section of study, Parashat Va'et Hanan, includes in the parasha the description of the great revelation at Mount Sinai. The Sinaitic revelation, considered one of the highlights of Jewish history and perhaps of world history. Interestingly enough, in one of the texts following the revelation, God tells Moshe to instruct the people. I'm quoting from chapter 5, verse 27. Lech emor lahem, shuvu lachem la'aholechem. Go and speak to them. God says to Moses, go and tell them to return to their tents. The rabbis understand this to mean to return to their family life, to return to their spouses. The question is, why is it necessary? What is the significance of God telling Moshe to instruct the people to go back to their homes, to go back to their spouses? If the revelation at Sinai is over, of course they would return home. Would we think that they would remain at Sinai forever? According to one approach in rabbinic literature, the commandment was necessary, for there was a godly prohibition of intimacy for the 3 days prior to the revelation. Eyu nechonim l'shloshet yamim al tigishu el isha. The Gemara teaches in Tractate Beitzah 5b that this is one of the biblical sources of teaching the Torah, teaching that when something is prohibited by a certain level authority, it can only become permitted by an equal level authority. Namely, milamed shekol davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher lahatiro. If God was the one who had separated husbands and wives, if God is the one who said relations are prohibited in preparation for the Sinaitic revelation, it is only through the express word of God that they would be permitted to once again resume connection. However, I would like to study an additional insight into this commandment of Shuvu lachem liohalechem, returning to their tents, and as mentioned, understood by the rabbis to mean returning to normal levels of physical closeness between husbands and wives. Rambam, Maimonides, in his great code of law, Mishneh Torah, as well as other great rabbinical teachers and scholars, point out that one of the closest parallels that we have of loving God and clinging to God is the love and closeness between married couples. The special love felt by a husband for a wife and the special love felt by a wife for her husband are understood in rabbinic writings as levels of parallelism to the levels of loving God. It would then seem that it was important to instruct the people to return to their tents. Shuvu lachem liohalechem, for through their closeness, for through their connection with their spouses, they would be continuing the connection to the divine. Ish v'isha zachu shchina b'neihem. The presence of God is ever present when husband and wife are together in a proper way. After experiencing the great levels of divine closeness, they are now required to use that experience of closeness in their own personal relationships, in their own homes, in their own tents. Shuvu lachem liohalechem. I find it most important to note that Parashat Va'et Hanan is not the only place in Tanakh wherein we read of a special return to the tents, returned to the privacy of the home after a great spiritual happening. In the book of Kings, Kings 1, Melachim Aleph, Perek Het Pasuk Samach Vav, we read a description of the great dedication ceremony of Solomon's temple. They celebrated in this temple celebration for 7 days and 7 more days. There was a great awe of holiness and happiness. Chapter 8, yes, verse 66 of Kings 1. Bayom Hashemini Shilach et ha'am. After the celebration of the dedication ceremonies, King Solomon sent the people home. Vayelechu le'ahalehem. Almost parallel words, a phrase very similar to the phrase in our parasha. They returned to their tents. They went home, smehim v'tovei leiv, joyous and in the greatest of moods. Why the need to tell us that they went home? Would we think that they stayed in the temple forever? I believe that the verse there in Kings is teaching a similar message to our verse in our parasha. I believe that the teaching there is that they took the temple experience, they went home with it, and they joined together with their spouses after having joined together with God in the temple of celebration. After experiencing the great godly happenings in the temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, they then became committed to continue this level in their personal family life. The rabbis teach in Tractate Shabbat 30a, Vayelchu li'ahalehem smehim v'tovei leiv, Vayelchu li'ahalehem shematze'u nishotehem v'tahara, smehim shenehenu miziv hashchina, v'tovei leiv shenit'abberu nishotehen shel kol echad ve'echad. All those returning home from the temple happening, they were all able to be intimate. They felt the great joy of the divine presence, and they were blessed with the blessings of pregnancies. In some people's minds, if they experienced Sinai, if they experienced the temple, so their religious response and reaction to these great happenings, to these great events, is often to separate from one's family life. After all, they were just connected to the highest spiritual divine. There is a tendency, under such circumstances, to emphasize only the spiritual elements of our existence and avoid or minimize our physical connections. The Torah is teaching the very opposite. Ad Rabbah. We are to take the Torah of Sinai and bring it into our homes. We must not separate from family life, but rather enhance it with the special sacred teachings of the Torah of life. We should share it with our families. We should bring Sinai and to our children and to our grandchildren. Shuvu lachem li'ahalechem. We are to take the sanctuary of Jerusalem back with us into our places of residence. We return to our homes to elevate our homes to the level of God's home in the temple in Jerusalem. We don't separate from our families as a result of the temple. We get ever so closer to our spouses, ever so closer to our parents, to our brothers, to our sisters, to our children, to our grandchildren, all as a result of the temple experience. Vayelchu li'ahalehem, shuvu lachem li'ahalechem. May we each experience the highest of levels of closeness to God, and may that closeness bring us ever so closer to each and every one of the members of our families, and each and every one ever so closer to each other as a result of Sinai and as a result of the temple. Thank you so much for this. Shalom.
Thank you.